Hello friends, welcome to UGC EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Satya Raj from the discipline of Geography, School of Sciences, Indira Gandhi National Open University, Delhi. Today I am going to elaborate upon applied climatology, which comes under the paper Climatology. First of all, let us discuss what could be the possible learning outcome of this module. After going through this module, you should be able to define applied climatology, distinguish between different sources of climatological data, correlate between climate and natural systems, describe climate and societal systems, and explain the impact of climate and health. In this course so far, you have learnt about the processes and factors that shape the climate of a place, ranging from a micro scale to global or planetary scale. You have studied about the progress in climatology and other contemporary issues related to climate change and its effects, rural and urban climatology, etc. You have also studied about weather forecasting methods and its importance. In this module, you will learn about applied aspects of climatology. So here we deal with the effects of climate rather than its causes. Any subject of study should have an applied aspect so as to benefit the society, and so should not be purely academic. Since weather and climate of a particular place is a major determinant in shaping our activities and lifestyle, climatology as a subject matter has immense practical utility, and there is a need to study the applied aspects of climatology with greater sincerity. In simple words, we can define applied climatology as the study of effects of climate on natural and social systems. Let us also examine a few definitions given by some leading scholars according to H. Landsberg and W. C. Jacobs in 1951. Applied climatology is the scientific analysis of climatic data in the light of useful applications for operational purpose. As per K. Smith in 1987, applied climatology may be defined as the use of achieved and real-time climatic information to solve a variety of social, economic, environmental problems for clients and managers in the fields such as agriculture, industry, and energy. Another definition was given by G. A. Marotz in 1989, who defined applied climatology as the scientific use of climatic data and the theoretical constructs for the solution of a particular problem. Now, the meaning and importance. Any subject cannot survive if it is purely academic. It should have some practical contributions to the society. These days, a considerable amount of work is being done by climatologists considering its applied aspects. However, the field of applied climatology is of recent origin and has emerged during 1940 and 50s. By 1951 to 60, the scope of applied climatology further widened when the impact of climate was studied in relation to human activities. It is also true that climate has a lot of bearing on our lifestyle. It determines the type of food we eat, type of clothes we wear, and the type of houses we live in. These three things are the basic necessity of human beings. Take for example the snow houses or igloo built by Eskimos of tundra region because of their sub-zero temperatures prevailing there, which prevents the house from melting and also keeps the inside warm due to insulating properties of snow. These igloo are quite different from the houses built in tropical regions, which are quite open and aerated, having lots of windows for wind and sunlight to enter the house. Similarly, we also know that vegetation is the index of climate, so the types of crops we grow has a lot of bearing on the climatic conditions of the place. Take for example, people living in extremely cold conditions, say in tundra regions, cannot grow crops for major time in a year as the subsoil remains frozen in those areas, and whatever grows there is nothing more than the mosses and lichen. So these are eaten by the local people through food gathering, so who also resort to other means like hunting to supplement their food needs. On the other hand, in humid tropical regions where climate is favorable for a wide range of crops, agriculture and allied activities are predominant source of livelihood, and food needs of the people are provided through these activities. You may now reason out why people in warm tropics wear cotton clothes and people in cold countries wear warm and well insulated clothes. Of course, in warm areas people wear light cotton clothes to keep themselves cool and prevent themselves from excessive sweating, while in cold regions people wear warm insulated clothes in order to retain their body temperatures from excessively cold temperatures and winds. Today, technology has enabled us to survive in extreme weather conditions with the help of air conditioners and other items of comfort. Still, the impact of climate cannot be ignored. Therefore, while planning our economic and social policies, elements of weather and climate should be given utmost importance. In the coming sections of this module, you will study about applied aspects of climatology in greater detail. First of all, let us get acquainted with different sources of climatic data. Now, recently there is a greater dissemination of climatological data due to the services provided by several weather agencies and meteorological departments. This has enabled the climatologists to get access to climatic data for their studies. Some relevant climatic data are also in the internet, either free of cost or at a marginal cost. So far as the sources of data collection related to climate data is concerned, there are of two types: primary sources and secondary sources. The primary sources of climatic data collection includes the processes where the investigator himself or herself goes to the field and collects climatic data using various instruments like thermometers, radiometers, moisture sensors, etc. Secondary sources of data are collected elsewhere and then compiled and quality checked, which then gets ready for climatologists and researchers for use. So, the climatologists in this case do not collect the data themselves, but rely on external sources or agencies or various meteorological departments spread across the world like World Meteorological Department, National Center for Atmospheric Research, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA), India Meteorological Department, etc. Nowadays, meteorological data is also available on the internet. The data is finally reanalyzed by climatologists and various atmospheric variables are segregated for use in research or other climate related studies. Now, let us focus our attention on the direct and indirect impacts of elements of weather and climate on human beings and their activities. We start off with the discussion on the impact of climate on natural systems. Climate and natural systems. Our natural systems comprises of all the 5 spheres, that is lithosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere and cryosphere. There is a continuous interaction between these spheres and climate plays a major role in affecting different processes that occurs within these systems. Processes in the atmosphere inherently affect other spheres. First of all, let us study the impact of climate on lithosphere. You should be knowing that lithosphere comprises of rigid outermost crust and upper portion of mantle of the earth. Various geomorphological processes takes place in the lithosphere and climate happens to be a major driving factor that have direct impact on these processes. Exogenetic processes includes denudational processes of weathering and erosion, which basically originates due to climate factors. These days, the field of climatic geomorphology is an emerging field, and the researchers study how temperature and moisture affects the rate of weathering, soil formation, subsurface freeze and thaw, etc. It was started as a distinct branch of geomorphology in the 20th century in France and Germany. Elements of climate like temperature, humidity, wind circulation, etc. affect various erosional processes like fluvial, aeolian, marine, groundwater, glacial, periglacial, etc. It is also a well-known fact that spatial variations in climatic parameters like temperature, humidity, precipitation, etc. leads to variations in the landforms in different climatic regions. For example, a region with high mean annual temperature and humidity favors deep chemical weathering, and the steep slopes in these regions would have the presence of gullies. Also, high temperature and humidity favors dense vegetation on such slopes. So, soil erosion, sheet wash and other erosional activities are reduced to a great extent in the slopes having dense vegetation. Contrary to this, slopes which have been cleared of natural vegetation would experience active erosion. Now, humidity also leads to events like landslides, soil creep and other mass wasting activities along with slopes. Glaciers and winds also shape the landforms. These are well established research frontiers for climatic geomorphologists. Now comes the atmosphere. Atmosphere is a gaseous envelope surrounding the earth and contains several gases as well as minute suspended solid and liquid particles called aerosols. These are held by Earth's force of gravity and supports life. Nitrogen and oxygen are the two major constituent gases that make up 99% of dry air in lower atmosphere. The remaining 1% is constituted by argon, carbon dioxide, helium, methane, hydrogen, nitrogen oxide, ozone, etc. Out of this 1%, few are greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, etc. Due to human activities like burning of fossil fuels emanating from industries, etc., the percentage of greenhouse gases has increased, and this has in turn increased the temperature of the atmosphere, as these gases are transparent to incoming solar radiation but traps the outgoing long wave terrestrial radiation and creates a warming effect. A change in temperature would affect other climatic elements like humidity, pressure, etc., and have an adverse effect on all the spheres. It would bring change in landscape, water bodies, ice sheets as well as geochemical cycles. Now, hydrosphere. Hydrosphere is the discontinuous layer of water at or near the Earth's surface and includes all liquid and frozen waters on the surface, underground, in rocks and soil as well as in atmosphere as water vapor. The processes operating in hydrosphere are hydrological processes, due to which water is in a constant state of motion and gets transferred from one realm and form to the other in a hydrological cycle. Climate is also a major determinant of hydrological processes. Temperature and precipitation are the two important climatic parameters that directly affect the amount, seasonality and distribution of water available in different realms of hydrosphere like surface runoff, overland flow, soil water retention or infiltration of rainwater, channel flow, storage, etc. If there is a change in global climate system, it affects the water on Earth's surface and changes the water balance in different realms. This also affects the human systems like agriculture, fisheries, environmental management, etc. Changes in climatic parameters affect the salinity, which also affects the hydrosphere. They have an impact on fisheries and coastal and marine ecosystem. Climate range also affects the deep water circulation in oceans by altering the thermohaline circulation. The hydrological processes also gets affected due to human activities like deforestation, urbanization, industrialization, concretization, etc., which results into a change of climatic parameters either directly or indirectly. Now, biosphere. Biosphere is the life supporting layer which surrounds our planet Earth and consists of all living organisms, the biotic component, energy, the energy component, and the physical environment, which is the abiotic component. Climatological impacts are felt in biosphere in a number of ways, and it affects the interactions between living organisms themselves and also between living organisms and physical environment. These interactions can be in the form of predator-prey relationship, disease and insect infestations, etc. The atmospheric processes are also responsible for these large-scale input-output mechanisms through biogeochemical cycles. They also have impact on the soil composition, its vertical profile, soil moisture and its erosion. Now comes the cryosphere. You may also be familiar with the term cryosphere. Cryosphere is the frozen part of the Earth system. It includes ice and snow on the land as well as that found on water bodies. Snow covered areas on land includes continental ice sheets found in Greenland, Antarctica as well as other areas of snow and permafrost. The other part of cryosphere found on water bodies includes the frozen parts of oceans near the polar regions and also includes the frozen rivers and lakes. Climate has a lot of effect on cryosphere. You must have read in a previous module of this course that snow has a very high albedo or reflectivity of the incident short wave solar radiation. This means that it reflects about 90% of the incident light, or it can be said that it has an albedo of 90%. A slightest increase in the temperature conditions would melt some of snow, and this would decrease the albedo of that part of the cryosphere, which increases the rate of melting of snow even further. The conditions are just the reverse when there is a decrease in temperature conditions of the cryosphere. Refer to figure 1 to get a clear picture of the effect of climate on different natural systems. Let us now study about the impact of climate on societal systems. Climate and societal systems. Climate has a lot of impact on societal systems. Some of them are impacted directly or in a primary manner, while others are affected in an indirect or secondary manner. Let us first get acquainted with the impact of climate on societal systems like agriculture, transport sector, recreational activities, energy or power requirement and insurance sector, which are directly affected by climatic parameters. Now in agriculture, which is the most primary occupation of human beings and marks the beginning of the sedentary life, prior to agriculture, human beings spent a nomadic life wandering about one place to another and practiced hunting and food gathering for their sustenance. Climatic elements like temperature, humidity, pressure, etc. determines the type of crops that are grown in a particular area and also determines their distribution at places having similar climatic conditions. It also determines the farming practices. Today in the technological era, a lot of advances have been made in the field of agriculture, and it has been possible to grow crops in quite adverse conditions. However, impact of climate cannot be ignored. Take for example temperature, which acts as one of major climatic parameter and affects the crops at different successive stages of their development, right from sowing and germination to their maturity. An optimum temperature is required at every stage of development of crops. Otherwise, the quality and the yield of crops are affected. For example, in India, a sudden increase in temperature from the beginning of March speeds up the ripening of wheat, which reduces the wheat yield. Similarly, frosts and hailstorms are also very dangerous for crops. Frosts are responsible for damaging crops like potatoes, tomatoes, oilseeds, peas, etc. In the same way, fruit orchards in the mountains and valleys are also damaged due to frost, which results due to temperature inversion. Hailstorms associated with western disturbances also pose a serious threat to the standing crops of wheats, vegetables, oilseeds and rabi crops, which are the winter crops. Moisture is another important climatic parameter that affects the cultivation of crops. As plants derive their nutrients from the soil, so soil moisture is very important for plants. The amount of soil moisture varies from being in saturated stage to field capacity stage to wilting stage. Saturated stage refers to the stage when all the voids and pores of the soil are filled with water, and such conditions are preferred by crops like paddy, sugarcane, etc., which are water intensive crops. In field capacity stage, about 50% of the total voids and pore spaces are filled with water and rest is occupied by air. Such a soil condition is favorable for millets, maize, wheat, mustard seeds, etc. Lastly, the wilting stage, as the name suggests, refers to the stage when soil water is lost through continuous evaporation and the crop wilts. So, such type of soil is non-conducive for any crops. Apart from soil moisture, atmospheric moisture and precipitation affects the agricultural productivity. There are normally three types of droughts resulting due to rainfall deficiency. First is the permanent drought, which is the characteristic of arid regions. Second is the seasonal drought, which is associated with two distinct periods of wet and dry seasons. And the third is the occasional drought, which is associated with rainfall variability. Besides moisture, incoming solar radiation energy is also an important parameter which is controlled by climate. Productivity of any crop depends on the efficiency of plants to convert the solar energy into chemical energy. Solar energy also regulates the temperature conditions of the particular place and decreases from equator to poles. So, it is also a major determinant of the types of crops grown at a particular place as well as its productivity. Now, climate and transportation. Transportation is another societal sector which is impacted by climate. It forms the backbone of any country's economy, and as on it depends the movement of raw material and finished products, food grains, commodities, people, etc. Machine or fossil fuel based transportation system includes air transport, water transport and land transport. Air transport makes tremendous use of weather conditions like temperature at varying altitudes, snowfall, winds and turbulence, overcast sky and low visibility, heavy rain, etc. The field is also known as aviation climatology, which includes average weather at different altitudes and over different locations on the earth. Air transport uses climatic data at all stages like takeoff stage, flying stage and landing stage. Similarly, we have highway meteorology or highway climatology, which studies the relationship between weather and climate and road transport. Temperature is an important parameter which impacts the road transport, as freezing temperatures cause frosting of road materials, while increasing temperatures greater than 35 degrees centigrade causes the non-concrete roads to melt. A dip in temperature below minus 20 degrees centigrade also brings about waxing of diesel, which makes the vehicular movement impossible. Cyclonic winds also blocks the roads by uprooting trees along the roadsides and bringing other debris, accumulating them on the roads. Sandstones and dust storms also play havoc to the road traffic. Excessive rainfall also causes flooding of roads and causes a lot of inconvenience to the traffic and people. Elements of weather like temperature, rainfall conditions leading to fog, snow, etc. also affect the rail transport. Rail tracks are severely affected due to seasonal variations of temperature conditions. Freezing temperatures sometimes bring about fractures in the tracks, and condition being more prevalent in the states of Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Rajasthan, etc. in India. Fog creates several visibility problems and delays the trains as they move about very slowly. Heavy rainfall also causes flooding along the railway tracks and also damages them. Weather-induced oceanic phenomena of tides, waves, etc. affect the oceanic transport or shipping. Weather elements like temperature, precipitation and atmospheric disturbances like cyclones, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. badly affect the water transport along oceans and seas. Dense fogs also reduces visibility and creates hassles in water transport. Temperature below the freezing point leads to formation of icebergs, which creates obstacles in water navigation. Now, climate and recreational activities and tourism. Climate affects several forms of recreation and tourism industry. Some of the recreational activities like skiing, as you know, directly depends on sub-freezing temperatures and snowfall. Similarly, sport events like outdoor ones especially depends on good weather. Activities like hill trekking, skiing, gliding, surfing, etc. are weather dependent sports. On the other hand, sports like football, cricket, rugby, volleyball, etc. are weather interference sports, as they are interfered or interrupted by weather activities like rainfall, thunderstorms, dust storms, fogs, etc. Now, it must be obvious for you that climatic factors affecting tourism and recreation are air temperature, sunshine, humidity, cloudiness, wind speed, etc. Based on these, tourism can be grouped into climate dependent tourism and attractiveness dependent tourism. Visits to hill stations during summers are examples of climate dependent tourism, while visits to, say, like Sahasradhara Falls in Dehradun is an example of attractiveness based tourism. Refer to figure 2 and figure 3 to get a clear picture of climate based tourism and attractiveness based tourism respectively. Religious tourism is also dependent on weather and climatic conditions, as quite a number of religious places are situated on high altitudes, which are landslides prone. Figure 4 shows path that leads to Vaishno Devi shrine, which is usually landslide prone. Rainy seasons are avoided by tourists as landslides are more frequent due to rains. Besides, some religious places situated at high altitudes are open only for a limited duration during the summers to avoid the extremely freezing temperatures prevailing there in winters and other times. An example of this can be cited as the visit to Char Dham like Kedarnath, Badrinath, Yamunotri, Gangotri, Kailash Mansarovar, etc. Let us now get acquainted how climate is directly related to energy requirement of the society and also the insurance sector. Climate has a direct impact on the amount of energy consumed. You can easily reason this out, as extremes of temperatures leads to greater consumption of energy. Our body needs an optimum amount of temperature. If the temperature rises to an intolerable extent, then the power is needed to run air conditioners to cool the room to an optimum level so that it becomes comfortable. Reverse is a condition when a place experiences freezing temperatures. In that case, extra power is required to operate blowers and air conditioners that produce a warming effect on the room. Power companies often take suggestions from climatologists so as to get an estimate of the power needed for a particular season based on climate forecasts. Climatologists also give suggestions regarding feasibility of exploring the use of non-conventional sources of energy for a particular place, which could in fact reduce the burden of fossil fuels and also save environment by providing green energy. Now, the climate and insurance sector. The insurance and risk management sector is also directly influenced by weather and climate. Disasters do happen when people settle in areas vulnerable to hazards. So, You know that these days a lot of developmental activities have come up in hazard prone areas. This has led to greater inhabitation or settlement in those areas compared to the past. Sometimes even the carrying capacity of those regions have exceeded, and any hazard would result in the severe loss of life and property. A very good example can be seen in figure 5, which shows Kedarnath area in 1882 and 2011. You must have noticed that there are many settlements that have come up in these years around the temple area, which is a landslide prone area, especially during the rainy season. This was one of the main reasons why so many people lost their lives in the heavy rains of June 2013, when the area experienced multiple landslides and also breach of Chorabari Lake, which washed away the entire settled area around the Kedarnath temple. So again, consultancy of atmospheric scientists are taken by the insurance and risk management companies as well as national disaster management agencies of government in the form of pre-warning given by them. This helps in the evacuation of areas and save life, and to some extent curtail the loss of property too. Now, secondary societal impacts. So far you have studied about the societal systems which are affected by primary weather and climatic elements. Now the secondary impact of climate on societal system is discussed in brief. Climate parameters have direct influence on agriculture, which in turn affects the food prices. If the crop fails, the shortage leads to soar in the prices of affected crops. Similar situation is also reached during extreme weather events, which make even bare sustenance almost impossible for those affected. This also affects the economic as well as political conditions of the place sometimes. Failure of the government to handle the price rise of essential commodities leads to a kind of unrest among people who are affected. In India and few other places in the world have witnessed the downfall or even changes in the government due to these factors. With the above discussion, it is evident that climate plays a major role on societal sector. Now let us study the impact of climate in the health sector. We have already discussed that human body can survive in certain sorts of climatic conditions. We require an optimum amount of light, sunshine, temperature, humidity, precipitation, and above all the requisite amount of oxygen. If these parameters are above or below an optimum level, there is an adverse effect on human health. We all know that at high altitudes, that is in mountainous regions, there is a lack of oxygen due to low air pressure in those regions. You might have noticed that while traveling towards higher altitudes, you often get nausea feeling or experience bleeding from the nose. This happens because body pressure is high compared to the surrounding atmospheric pressure in the regions, and in order to maintain a balance between the body and the environment, things like nausea and bleeding occurs and creates a lot of discomfort. At extremely high altitudes, breathing might be even impossible without the aid of oxygen cylinders. You might have seen that mountaineers going for higher expeditions like Mount Everest are often armed with oxygen cylinders, wear proper insulated dresses, or so as to combat the extremely cold mountain winds. Refer to figure 6 to get an idea of mountaineers on an expeditions to Mount Everest. Normal body temperature of human being is 98.6 degree Fahrenheit or 37 degree centigrade. Body metabolism helps to maintain a balance between the incoming and outgoing heat. When the surrounding air temperature is above the human body temperature, body gains heat and vice versa. The skin acts as a primary source of heat exchange from the body to the environment and vice versa. This gives rise to two extreme conditions, namely hypothermia and hyperthermia. Hypothermia is a condition that happens in extremely cold environmental conditions when the body temperature falls much below the normal level and causes severe frost bites, and in acute causes leads to the death of human beings due to freezing of tissues and destruction of cells. On the other hand, hyperthermia is a condition which happens in extremely hot environments and human body temperature rises and blood vessels dilate. A lot of sweating occurs as the moisture escapes from the skin in an attempt to reduce the body temperature by evaporation. Both the conditions of hypothermia and hyperthermia bring a lot of discomfort to the human body and is also fatal in some cases. It is obvious that the comfort zone of human beings exists when the normal temperature is maintained. Based on this, a few comfort indices have been devised known as the Physioclimatic Indices. These include the heat index stress, standard effective temperature, apparent temperature and comfort clothing, etc. Nowadays, the effect of climate and weather on human health is studied under the upcoming branch of climatology, which is called medical climatology. Certain diseases are related to climate. For example, global warming and humidity may increase the cases of vector-borne diseases like malaria, dengue, etc. And so we conclude that climate has a role to play on human health and comfort. Now let us sum up what we have learned so far. Applied climatology is the study of effects of climate on natural and societal systems. Sources of climatic data is broadly divided into two types, that is primary and secondary sources. We have studied the effect of climate on the natural systems, which consists of 5 spheres. There is a continuous interaction between these spheres and climate plays a major role in affecting different processes that occurs within these systems. Processes in the atmosphere inherently affect other spheres, and climate also has a huge impact on societal systems like agriculture, transport, tourism, energy requirement, insurance sector, etc. Climate has a lot of bearing on human health, as human body can survive well in certain suits of climatic conditions. So thank you very much.